Number 1. The Antikythera Mechanism. In 1901, a team of Greek sponge divers working off the coast of Antikythera Island hauled a mass of corroded bronze fragments from the floor of the Aegean Sea. The fragments came from a Roman-era shipwreck dating to roughly 60 to 70 BC. Nobody understood what they had found. For decades, the pieces sat in storage, dismissed as unremarkable debris from antiquity. What those divers pulled from the water was nothing less than the oldest known analog computer on Earth. The device, when intact, sat inside a wooden case roughly the size of a shoebox, about 34 by 18 by 9 centimeters. Today it exists as 82 fragments. 30 surviving bronze gear wheels remain, 27 of them concentrated in the largest piece known as Fragment A. At minimum, the original mechanism contained 39 interlocking bronze gears. It was hand-cranked, and it modeled the heavens. The astronomical capabilities are staggering by any standard. The mechanism predicted the positions of the Sun and Moon. It tracked all 5 planets visible to the naked eye: Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. It did this by fusing Babylonian period relations, numerical cycles accumulated over centuries of observation, with Greek astronomical theory. Encoded in its bronze gears was the Saros cycle, an eclipse prediction system spanning 18 years and 11 days. A second cycle, the Exeligmos, covered 3 Saros cycles, roughly 54 years. These were not rough estimates. They were mechanically precise. One of the most remarkable features is a pin and slot mechanism that calculated the Moon's anomalous orbit, its non-circular path around the Earth. This was a mechanical translation of the lunar theory developed by the astronomer Hipparchus. Someone took abstract mathematics and turned it into moving metal. In 2024, researchers at the University of Glasgow applied a technique borrowed from gravitational wave analysis, Bayesian statistical methods normally used to detect ripples in spacetime, to study the mechanism's calendar ring. They concluded the ring most likely contained 354 holes, consistent with a lunar calendar. The average radial variation per hole was just 0.028 millimeters. To put that in modern terms, that is a manufacturing tolerance comparable to precision machining. A 2021 study published in Nature by a team at University College London proposed a new model for the front display. They drew on Babylonian cuneiform texts and identified planetary period relations that had not previously been documented in any ancient source, including a Venus period of 289 and 462, and a Saturn period of 427 and 442. X-ray CT scans conducted in 2005 had already revealed inscriptions hidden inside the corroded bronze, describing the motions of celestial bodies and how they appeared on the display, a miniature Greek cosmos in metal. 3 interpretive frameworks compete. The mainstream position holds that this was a sophisticated astronomical calculator, likely built on the island of Rhodes, possibly connected to the tradition of Hipparchus and the Archimedean school. Cicero himself described Archimedes building a similar device. The archaeological interpretation points to the Corinthian dialect found in the Metonic dial, linking the mechanism to Corinth or Syracuse and suggesting a specific school of mechanical philosophy. The fringe perspective argues that the device is simply too refined to be a first attempt. It implies an entire lost tradition of Greek mechanical computing, predecessors we have never found. The mechanism does contain errors. Its Mars pointer drifts by as much as 38 degrees, but these are not mistakes in construction. They are limitations in Greek planetary theory, limitations not corrected until Ptolemy published the Almagest around 160 AD, and Kepler formulated his laws of planetary motion in 1609 and 1619. The device honestly reflects the best science of its era. Professor Mike Edmonds of Cardiff University has called the Antikythera Mechanism more valuable than the Mona Lisa in terms of historic and scarcity value. In 2010, engineer Andrew Carroll built a fully working replica out of Lego bricks based on Derek de Sola Price's reconstruction, proving the gear logic functions exactly as theorized. No comparable device appeared in Europe for over 1,300 years. Not until the astronomical clocks of the 13th and 14th centuries did anything approach this level of mechanical sophistication. The knowledge was lost. The Roman conquest prioritized military engineering over Greek theoretical mechanics. Precision gearwork had no institutional home after the fall of the great Hellenistic centers. All 82 fragments remain at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, where ongoing research uses X-ray CT, polynomial texture mapping, and AI-assisted analysis. The cultural footprint extends well beyond academia. Nightwish released a 2024 track titled Antikythera Mechanism on their album Yesterwind, partnering with Finnish watchmaker Puch for a limited edition tribute watch. But the deeper implication is this: the precision of manufacture demands undiscovered predecessor mechanisms. This was not a one-off invention, it was the visible tip of a lost tradition. And if this level of precision existed in 100 BC, the question becomes unavoidable: what else has been lost? That question extends far beyond computation. It reaches into the physics of light itself. Number 2. The Nimrud Lens. In 1850, Sir Austin Henry Layard was excavating the northwest palace of King Ashur-Nasir-pal II at Nimrud in what is now Iraq. Among the ruins, he unearthed a small, seemingly unremarkable piece of rock crystal. It sat in collections for over a century before anyone fully appreciated what it might represent. The object is natural quartz, slightly oval, roughly 4.2 centimeters in maximum diameter, between 4.1 and 6.2 millimeters thick. It has been ground into a plano-convex shape, flat on one side, curved on the other. Its focal point sits approximately 11 centimeters from the flat surface. Its focal length is about 12 centimeters. In functional terms, it is equivalent to a 3 times magnifying glass, and because rock crystal does not deteriorate, it still works after 2,800 years. 12 small cavities dot its surface, open during the grinding process. These originally contained naphtha, or fluid trapped naturally within the raw crystal. The excavation context placed it beneath fragments of blue opaque glass that appeared to be enamel from a disintegrated ivory or a wooden object, possibly decorative furniture inlay. Layard himself immediately hypothesized it was a magnifying glass, used to read the tiny cuneiform inscriptions on Assyrian seals and clay tablets. That interpretation sat comfortably for a long time. Then, in 1999, Professor Giovanni Pettinedo dropped a bombshell. He proposed that the lens was part of an ancient Assyrian telescope. His evidence centered on Assyrian depictions of Saturn as a god surrounded by a ring of serpents, which he interpreted as a cultural rendering of Saturn's rings observed through optics. Skeptics countered immediately. Serpents appear everywhere in Assyrian mythology, and no Assyrian astronomical text mentions anything resembling a telescope. The British Museum's official position remains cautious. They describe the optical properties as probably accidental and classify the object as decorative inlay. It sits in room 55, catalog number 90, 1959. Dr. Robert Temple took the investigation further. He documented over 450 ancient optical artifacts, mostly lenses, from museums around the world. His argument: ancient civilizations understood optics far better than we commonly assume. Heinrich Schliemann excavated 48 rock crystal lenses at ancient Troy, one of the largest hoards ever found. These were lost with the Trojan gold and only rediscovered in Moscow after World War II. Temple's technical analysis of the Nimrud lens revealed something unexpected. It was ground in a toroidal pattern, a technique used to correct astigmatism that only became publicly available around 1900. He proposed it may have functioned as a monocle for King Sargon II, who reigned from 722 to 705 BC, since it was found in the throne room. Angel Tomas Camacho Garcia offered a balancing view. The toroidal grinding was likely achieved through trial and error rather than theoretical optical knowledge. But he still called it a remarkable achievement. The 3 frameworks line up clearly: mainstream, decorative inlay with incidental optical properties. Archaeological, a functional magnifying glass, part of a broader ancient lens tradition with over 450 known examples. Fringe, a component of a telescope system that explains Assyrian astronomical precision. The lens tradition runs deeper than Assyria. Egyptian lenses date to the 4th and 5th dynasties, roughly 2500 BC. The famous seated scribe statue in the Louvre has rock crystal eyes that function as inlaid lenses. The Nimrud lens predates Hans Lippershey's official invention of the telescope in 1608 by nearly 2400 years. Why was the knowledge lost? Lapidary crystal grinding was artisanal. It passed from master to apprentice. There was no theoretical framework to survive the collapse of Assyrian institutions. Whether this object was a telescope component, a magnifier, or a decoration, the existence of 450 ancient lenses across multiple civilizations tells us optical knowledge was far more widespread than any textbook acknowledges. And optics was not the only material science the ancients mastered. Consider what happened when the Romans mixed volcanic ash with seawater. Number 3, Roman concrete. Here is the paradox. Roman marine concrete has been exposed to seawater for over 2,000 years. In many cases, it has actually become stronger. Modern Portland cement exposed to salt water deteriorates within decades. Philip Brun of DuPont Pioneer calls Roman concrete the most durable building material in human history. The recipe is deceptively simple. Volcanic ash, known as pozzolana, sourced from Campi Flegrei near Pozzuoli outside Naples, mixed with quicklime, calcium oxide, and seawater, combined with volcanic rock aggregate. The pozzolana was so valuable it was shipped across the entire Roman Empire for construction projects. Pliny the Elder described the process in his 1st century work, Naturalis Historia. Volcanic ash mixed with water forming an impenetrable stone. In 2017, Marie Jackson at the University of Utah published a study in American Mineralogist that cracked the mystery. Seawater percolating through the concrete dissolves volcanic ash. The leached fluids generate rare minerals, aluminous tobermorite and philipsite, that form interlocking crystal plates within microcracks. The very force that destroys modern concrete reinforces the Roman version. Tobermorite is expensive and difficult to produce in laboratories, yet it grows spontaneously through ambient seawater reactions in ancient harbor structures. In 2023, Professor Admir Masick at MIT uncovered a second mechanism. Small white calcium deposits called lime clasts, long dismissed as signs of sloppy mixing, were actually created deliberately through hot mixing, combining quicklime at extreme temperatures. When cracks form, water travels through the lime clasts, dissolves them, and produces calcium-saturated solutions that recrystallize as calcium carbonate, filling cracks. Self-healing. Within weeks. Roman-inspired concrete healed cracks up to 0.6 millimeters across. Modern concrete cannot self-heal cracks larger than 0.2 to 0.3 millimeters. The evidence stands in plain sight. The Pantheon, completed in 128 CE, has an unreinforced dome spanning 43.3 meters. It is still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome after nearly 1,900 years. Some Roman aqueducts still deliver water to Rome today. The tomb of Caecilia Metella, built around 1 BCE, uses a potassium-rich variation that triggered mineral changes reinforcing interfacial zones. 3 interpretive models apply. Mainstream, sophisticated empirical engineering perfected over centuries of trial and error. Archaeological, the consistency across harbor sites, Caesarea Maritima, Portus Cosanus, Portus Nerunus, Bianus Sinus, all showing identical tobermorite and philipsite patterns, suggests a codified recipe, deliberately transmitted, not stumbled upon. Fringe, the self-healing properties were intentionally designed, implying theoretical knowledge of mineral chemistry that should not have existed in antiquity. The environmental implications are significant. Modern Portland cement production accounts for approximately 8% of global carbon dioxide emissions. Roman concrete required lower firing temperatures and far less energy. Jackson received a $1.4 million RPAE grant to develop modern marine concrete using volcanic materials. Masick founded a startup called DMAT, commercializing self-healing concrete based on Roman hot-mix lime class technology. The knowledge was lost because the fall of Rome destroyed everything that sustained it: guilds, supply chains for pozzolana, the engineering core that maintained the recipe. Concrete construction did not return to comparable sophistication until the 19th century. Over 1,300 years of regression, 2 independent self-healing mechanisms operating simultaneously in one ancient material. And modern science needed millions in grants and MIT laboratories to understand how either one worked. Rome mastered chemistry in building materials, but halfway around the world, ancient India mastered chemistry in metal. Number 4. The Iron Pillar of Delhi. It stands 7.21 meters tall with 1.12 meters buried below ground. It weighs over 6 tons. Its bell-pattern capital measures 306 millimeters across. A Garuda, the eagle mount of Vishnu, once stood atop it. For 1600 years, it has stood exposed to monsoons, humidity, and temperature swings. It is not rusted. The pillar is attributed to the Gupta Emperor Chandragupta II, known as Vikramaditya, who ruled from approximately 375 to 415 CE. A Sanskrit eulogy inscribed on its surface confirms this. It was likely originally erected near the Udayagiri caves and moved to Delhi by Tomar King Anangpal in the 11th century. The manufacturing method is forge welding, 98% wrought iron, produced by hammering multiple blooms into a uniform shaft, not cast in a mold. And the key chemical difference, unusually high phosphorus content at roughly 0.25% versus modern iron, which typically contains less than 0.05%, 5 times the modern level. R. Balasubramaniam of the Indian Institute of Technology at Kanpur unraveled the mechanism. Slag particles in the iron act as cathodes. The iron itself acts as the anode in miniature galvanic reactions. Phosphorus enriches the interface between metal and scale. Initial rust compounds, lepidocrasite and guthite, form first. Then, amorphous phosphate precipitates into a crystalline layer. The result is a protective film of Missa-white, a compound of iron hydrogen phosphate hydrate, just 1/20th of a millimeter thick. This film is extraordinarily compact, and it is self-regenerating. Scratch the surface and the phosphorus in the underlying metal reforms the protective barrier. 3 conditions had to align: second phase particles like slag and unreduced iron oxides, high phosphorus content, and alternate wetting-drying cycles, exactly what Delhi's semi-arid climate provides. How did ancient smiths achieve this high phosphorus content? They did not add lime to their furnaces, unlike modern practice. They used charcoal from high phosphorus wood, such as Cassia auriculata. Whether this was deliberate tradition or accumulated accident is debated. Low sulfur and manganese content further enhanced corrosion resistance. 3 theories frame the debate. Mainstream. An empirical metallurgical tradition refined over generations using locally available fuels. Archaeological. A deliberately codified technique, evidenced by its appearance in the Dar iron pillar, circa 1050 AD, and the Konark Sun Temple iron beams, proving this was a broader Indian tradition, not a one-off. Fringe. Erich von Däniken cited it in Chariots of the Gods in 1969 as evidence of extraterrestrial technology, though he later retracted the claim when the science was explained. India's Arthashastra, dating to roughly 300 BC, mentions advanced metal purification. The Rasaratna Samukaya describes iron treatments resembling passivation. IIT Kanpur's analysis used X-ray diffraction, Fourier IR spectroscopy, Nussbauer spectroscopy, and electron microscopy to fully characterize the rust layers at the atomic level. Modern threats now endanger what 16 centuries of weather could not destroy. Air pollution and acid rain are destabilizing the ancient phosphate film. The Archaeological Survey of India monitors the pillar and restricts public contact. Modern stainless steel achieves rust resistance through chromium at 10.5% or higher, a completely different chemical pathway. Ancient India achieved a parallel result through phosphorus. The Dar pillar, originally even larger than Delhi's, confirms this was no accident but a sustained tradition spanning centuries. Balasubramaniam calls the pillar a living testimony to the skill of metallurgists of ancient India. The irony is sharp. Modern iron rusts faster than iron forged 1600 years ago, because industrialization optimized for entirely different properties. India encoded corrosion resistance in iron. Rome, meanwhile, encoded something stranger in glass. Number 5. The Lycurgus Cup. In reflected light, it appears opaque jade green. Rotate it so light passes through the glass, and it transforms to deep, translucent ruby red. It is the only complete surviving example of ancient dichroic glass, and its secret is nanotechnology. The cuppa is a Roman cage cup, known as a diatretum, measuring about 16.5 centimeters high and 13.2 centimeters in diameter. It depicts King Lycurgus of Thrace entangled in the vines of ambrosia. The manufacturing represents a double achievement. First, it is a cage cup, thick glass painstakingly cut back to leave freestanding figures in high relief. An incredibly labor-intensive process with a high failure rate. Only about 50 Roman cage cup fragments survive. Second, it is dichroic. This is the only one combining figural decoration with color-shifting properties. The cause, nanoparticles of silver-gold alloy, 50 to 100 nanometers in diameter, dispersed throughout the glass. Approximately 330 parts per million silver and 40 parts per million gold. The alloy composition runs roughly 70% silver, 30% gold, with about 10% copper. When light interacts with these particles, it triggers localized surface plasmon resonance. Blue wavelengths scatter more effectively than red wavelengths, producing red transmission and green reflection. This physics was not understood by science until the 20th century. The dilution technique alone reveals sophistication. The proportions are so minute that researchers believe glassmakers added higher concentrations of metal to a large melt and progressively diluted with more glass. Serial dilution, a technique associated with modern chemistry. Three theories compete. Mainstream, as articulated by Ian Freestone of University College London. Skilled artisans stumbled on the effect through metallic contamination and refined it empirically without understanding nanoscale physics. They were highly skilled, Freestone observed, but they were not nanotechnologists. Archaeological, a letter attributed to Emperor Hadrian, who died in 138 AD, mentions gifting particolored cups that change color, suggesting dichroic glass was a known luxury deliberately produced. Fringe. The precision of 330 parts per million silver and 40 parts per million gold implies a controlled process indistinguishable from modern nanotechnology. The cup likely served a ritual function. The color change from green to red evokes ripening grapes appropriate for Bacchus cult rituals. It lacks a foot, suggesting it was passed hand to hand at feasts or suspended as an oil lamp. In 2020, Dutch researchers 3D printed a nanocomposite material replicating the Lycurgus effect using embedded gold and silver nanoparticles. The University of Illinois created nano-LCA arrays, cheap plastic stamps with 1 billion nanodents sprayed with gold and silver nanoparticles, functioning as biosensors that detect DNA, drugs, and proteins. Cambridge University created multicolored holograms using the dichroic nanoparticle principle, containing 16 million nanoparticles per square millimeter. Medical diagnostics, optical data storage, next-generation holographic displays all trace a direct lineage to this 1600-year-old drinking cup. Freestone confirmed the colloidal dispersion was remarkably uniform, not clumped. The process was controlled, even if not theoretically understood. The cup's uniqueness is precisely the problem. We have the masterpiece, but none of the failed experiments. The learning curve is invisible. A drinking cup designed to dazzle Roman dinner guests now helps detect diseases. It may be the longest technology transfer in human history. Roman glass exploited nanoparticles. But could ancient people have exploited something even more fundamental, electricity itself? Number 6. The Baghdad Battery. In 1936, during railway construction at Kujut Rabu near Baghdad, close to the ancient royal city of Ctesiphon, workers unearthed a strange assemblage. A clay jar about 14 centimeters tall, a rolled copper cylinder inside it, and an iron rod positioned centrally within the copper. All sealed with bitumen. The pottery style is now dated to the Sasanian period, roughly 224 to 640 AD, later than the original Parthian estimate. In 1938, Wilhelm Koenig published a paper proposing the object was a galvanic cell. His inspiration, watching Baghdad silversmiths using a nearly identical ceramic pot for electroplating. But that link collapsed under scrutiny. The technique Koenig observed in Baghdad had been imported from Birmingham, England, where John Wright invented it in 1839. Not an ancient survival. The replication experiments tell their own story. Willard Gray at General Electric built post-World War II replicas that generated approximately 1.5 to 2 volts using grape juice as electrolyte. Arne Eggebrecht claimed in 1978 to have electroplated a 100 nanometer silver layer using connected replicas, but no photographs or written documentation exist, according to his colleague Bettina Schmitz. In 2005, the television show Mythbusters connected 10 replicas in series and generated 4 volts, enough to electroplate a small coin. In January 2026, Alexander Bayes published a breakthrough in xenoplatonic papers. Previous experiments had only replicated the inner cell, producing roughly 0.4 volts. Bayes demonstrated that the unglazed clay jar itself forms a second outer cell, an aqueous tin air battery producing over 1.1 volts. Combined output, 1.4 volts or more, with visible electrochemical reactions. He then proposed a ritual corrosion hypothesis. The battery was used to corrode prayers written on paper wrapped around the iron rod. Corrosion as visible evidence of spiritual energy. 3 theories occupy the field. Mainstream. The vessels were scroll storage containers, since similar vessels at Seleucia and Ctesiphon contained copper tubes and iron rods interpreted as papyrus holders. Archaeological. A functional electrochemical device of unknown purpose, with David A. Scott of the Getty Conservation Institute stating flatly that there is absolutely no evidence for electroplating in this region at the time. Fringe. And novel, Bazzi's ritual corrosion hypothesis, or Paul T. Kacer's theory of electrotherapeutic pain relief, noting that ancient Greeks and Romans used electric fish for analgesia. St. John Simpson of the British Museum notes the original excavation was poorly documented. No wires, no connected circuit, no electroplated objects from this region and period have ever been found. Alessandro Volta's 1800 battery remains the first documented, scientifically understood electrochemical cell. If the Baghdad Battery is genuine, it precedes Volta by over 1,500 years. The artifact was housed in the National Museum of Iraq until 2003, when it was looted during the U.S. military operation. Its current whereabouts are unknown. Without the original object, further analysis is impossible. Electrochemistry is among the simplest physics phenomena to stumble upon. Iron, copper, and an acidic liquid are all you need. But stumbling upon something and understanding it are very different achievements. Electricity may be accidental. But can the same be said for flight? Number 7. The Saqqara Bird. For 70 years, it sat forgotten in a Cairo museum storeroom. Carved from sycamore wood, a species sacred to the goddess Hathor, it was discovered in 1898 in the tomb of Padi Emin at the Saqqara necropolis. It was catalogued as a bird figurine and filed away. Then, in 1969, Dr. Khalil Messaha found it. Messaha was a physician, a professor of artistic anatomy at the University of Helwan, a dowser, and an amateur aviation enthusiast. He noticed what others had missed. The object has a wingspan of exactly 18 centimeters, a length of 15 centimeters, and weighs 39.12 grams. It has a vertical tail like a rudder, rather than the horizontal fantail found on every other Egyptian bird figurine. No legs, no painted feather detailing. These absences are extremely unusual for the period. The wings exhibit a dihedral angle, the upward sloping geometry used in modern aircraft for lateral stability. The wing's cross-section tapers from 8 millimeters at the body to thin edges at the tips, mimicking a modern airfoil. Simon Sanderson put a replica in a wind tunnel. It generated 4 times its own weight and lift without any tailplane. He then added a horizontal stabilizer and ran the data through a Liverpool University flight simulator replicating Egyptian desert conditions. The virtual model flew successfully. But Martin Gregory, a professional glider designer, built his own sycamore wood replica. It was completely unstable, unable to fly even with a tailplane. Richard P. Hallion, senior advisor for air and space issues, assessed the object as too heavy and aerodynamically unstable for actual flight. 3 papyri found near the artifact reportedly contained the phrase, "I want to fly," though this is disputed as a loose translation. In the 1970s, the Egyptian Ministry of Culture convened a commission. They agreed the object was unique and might have aerodynamic value, but stopped short of calling it a model aircraft. 3 theories. Mainstream. A votive falcon figure, possibly representing Horus, or a decorative masthead from a sacred ceremonial boat. Archaeological. A sophisticated boomerang, since ancient Egyptians demonstrably used aerodynamic hunting boomerangs made from wood, and the dihedral angle and airfoil profile are consistent with advanced throwing weapons. Fringe, a scale model of a working glider, with prevailing north to south wind patterns in Egypt suggesting a culture that could have experimented with gliding. No other comparable aircraft-like figurine has ever been found at Saqqara or any other Egyptian site. The conflicting replica tests demonstrate how much depends on construction precision. Small differences in wood density or wing angle produce opposite outcomes. It sits today in room 22 of the Egyptian Museum in Cairo, inventory number special registered 6347. 39 grams of sycamore wood, generating more debate than many entire archaeological sites. The wind tunnel result, 4 times its own weight and lift without a tailplane, is remarkable regardless of what the object is. The shape works aerodynamically. The most honest assessment may be the 1970s Commission's verdict. It is unique. It has aerodynamic properties, and beyond that, certainty is impossible. From aerodynamics, we turn to something that looks uncannily like modern electrical engineering, at least at first glance. Number 8. The Dendera Light. Deep beneath the Temple of Hathor at Dendera in Upper Egypt lie underground crypts. The current structure dates mainly to the Greco-Roman period, built under Ptolemy XII and Roman emperors Tiberius and Augustus. The sacred site itself has roots to the Old Kingdom, roughly 2500 BC. Carved into the walls of Crypt 1C, Crypt 4, and Room G are 6 reliefs, 3 paired objects, each showing an elongated bulb-like shape containing a wavy serpent, emerging from a lotus flower, often supported by a jed pillar, with a kneeling figure or baboon nearby. In 1989, Erich von Däniken, along with Austrian authors Peter Krasse and Reinhard Habeck, popularized the claim that these reliefs depict ancient electric light bulbs resembling Crookes tubes. The mapping is specific. Serpent equals filament, jed pillar equals insulator, lotus equals socket, baboon equals warning symbol for high voltage equipment. A Norwegian electrical engineer first formally proposed the lamp interpretation. Another engineer built a working Crookes tube replica matching the relief dimensions and reported the filament glow matched the carving exactly. Proponents cite the absence of lampblack on tomb ceilings. But the hypostyle hall ceiling at Dendera itself is heavily caked with soot, mostly from later Coptic-era squatters, not ancient Egyptians. The mainstream Egyptological interpretation is thorough. The reliefs depict the god Harsamtis, Horus the uniter of the two lands, in serpent form, emerging from a lotus within a protective oval container, representing the womb of the sky goddess Nut. Hieroglyphic inscriptions surrounding the carvings explicitly describe Harsamtis, the Meskhetian night barge, lotus flowers, and cave figures. Standard Ptolemaic religious imagery, no mention of lighting technology. Sylvie Colville's work on the Dendera inscriptions identified the serpent as Ihai, son of Hathor and Horus, mythologically born from a lotus in the primordial sea of Nun. Kenneth Feeder sharpened the point. If ancient Egyptians possessed electric technology, physical evidence, glass shards, metal sockets, filament remnants would exist among thousands of excavated sites. None has been found. The lotus in lamp shape appears on many Egyptian reliefs as a standard motif. The jed pillar is documented in thousands of contexts associated with Osiris and stability. Never insulation. 3 theories. Mainstream religious depiction of Harsamtis or Ihai in standard Ptolemaic symbolic language, fully explained by surrounding inscriptions. Archaeological. The crypts functioned as analogues of the duet, the underworld, depicting cult statues ritually resurrected through contact with light during New Year ceremonies. Fringe. Ancient electric lighting supported by the soot absence and Crookes tube resemblance. A block of limestone was deliberately installed in the sandstone wall for these specific carvings, indicating the architects placed special importance on the scene. The temple also contains a famous zodiac ceiling, now in the Louvre, along with astronomical charts and calendrical systems. Dendera was a center for priestly astronomy, not electrical engineering. The visual resemblance to a light bulb is genuinely striking. That explains the theory's durability, but the inscriptions are readable, and they describe exactly what Egyptologists say they describe. The most interesting aspect of Dendera is not the light bulb at all. It is the fact that the temple was a functioning astronomical observatory, a genuine achievement that the fringe theory ironically overshadows. From a text we can read to a text nobody can. Number 9. The Phaistos Disc. On July 3, 1908, Italian archaeologist Luigi Pernier was excavating the Minoan palace of Phaistos on the south coast of Crete. He uncovered a disc of fine-grained fired clay, approximately 16 centimeters in diameter, about 2 centimeters thick, slightly egg-shaped. Side A is slightly concave. Side B is slightly convex. Stamped into both sides, spiraling from the edges toward the center, are 241 individual symbol impressions. They comprise exactly 45 distinct sign types, a count consistent with a syllabary, not an alphabet. And here is the critical technical detail. The symbols were stamped into wet clay using individual metal, dies or punches before firing. This is the world's oldest known example of movable type. It predates Gutenberg by approximately 3,200 years. The paradox is immediate. Creating 45 separate reusable stamps implies mass production was intended, yet no other stamped object of this type has ever been found. Anywhere. The recognizable symbols include a man with a distinctive hairstyle matching figurines from other Minoan sites, a woman, a child, a helmet, a shield, cattle, dolphins, lilies, a ship, a bee, and tools. A vertical line with 5 dots on each side's outer edge likely marks the beginning, with reading directions spiraling inward. The 45 symbols do not match linear A, linear B, or Cretan hieroglyphics. An entirely unique script. 0 parallels on Earth. Linear A itself remains undeciphered. With only 241 tokens, linguists confirm there is insufficient data for meaningful decipherment. Over 30 attempts have been made since 1911, Ionic Greek, Hittite, Luwian, Hebrew, Basque, Proto, Indo-European, Semitic languages, none achieved consensus. Doctor. Gareth Owens claimed 99% decipherment in 2018 using linear B phonetic values, proposing a Minoan religious hymn to the goddess Astarte. The academic community remains skeptical. In 2025, Ioannis Ragazes proposed the disc is not writing at all, but a Minoan board game. Arguing symbol orientations face players rather than readers. Jerome Eisenberg argued in 2008 that the disc was a modern forgery by Pernier, comparing it to Piltdown Man. But objects discovered decades after the disc support its authenticity. A 1926 Knossos ring with spiral text, a 1955 ceiling with a matching comb symbol, impressed fine ware fragments from Phaistos itself. The clay may not even be of local Cretan origin, suggesting it was imported. 3 theories. Mainstream, a unique Minoan ritual or administrative text in a script used so narrowly it left no other trace. Archaeological, possibly imported from another Aegean culture whose documents have not survived. Fringe and novel, a board game, or an outright forgery. The entire Minoan civilization collapsed possibly from the Thera eruption, taking both linear A and whatever language this disc represents into oblivion. No dies, no matching artifacts, no companion texts, no Rosetta Stone. It is one of the most completely isolated objects in all of archaeology. Even a culture that invented movable type 3,200 years before Gutenberg can vanish so completely that a single clay disc becomes an unsolvable puzzle. Speaking of unsolvable puzzles, at least the Phaistos Disc has the excuse of limited data. The next object has 240 pages of text and still defeats every codebreaker who tries. Number 10. The Voynich Manuscript, approximately 240 pages, some missing. Each measures 23.5 by 16.2 centimeters. Every page is written in an unknown script scholars call Voynichesi. Over 150,000 symbol instances using approximately 20 to 30 recurring characters. The vellum was carbon dated by the University of Arizona in 2009 to 1404 through 1438 with 95% confidence. The ink is standard iron gall, consistent with 15th century Europe. The manuscript is named after Wilfrid Voynich, who purchased it in 1912 from Villa Mondragone near Rome. The first confirmed owner was Georg Barisch, a 17th century Prague alchemist who spent years failing to decode it. The contents divide into sections: herbal, depicting unknown plants, astronomical and astrological, with zodiac symbols, biological, showing nude women in interconnected tubes and pools, cosmological, with circular diagrams, and pharmaceutical, showing jars and plant roots. None of the approximately 100 plant illustrations have been conclusively identified as any known species. The most famous failure belongs to William and Elizabeth Friedman, the NSA codebreakers who cracked Japan's purple cipher in World War II. They spent decades on the Voynich. They failed. The statistical properties are the deepest puzzle. Voynich has a second-order conditional entropy of approximately 2, significantly lower than natural languages, which typically range from 3 to 4. But at higher organizational levels, it displays natural language-like properties. Claire Bowen of Yale concluded it is likely an encoded natural language or a constructed language, not gibberish. Greg Kondrack's 2016 AI analysis identified potential Hebrew with a 97% letter frequency match. The resulting translation was incoherent nonsense. Gerard Cheshire's 2019 proto-romance claim was immediately dismantled by linguists as cherry-picking from multiple languages. In 2024, Brewer and Lewis published a study in the Social History of Medicine arguing the manuscript as a gynecological and conception manual based on the biological section imagery. Torsten Timm and Andreas Schinner offered the opposite direction. Their 2019 algorithmic model demonstrated that finite-state machines can generate Voynich-like text with matching repetition patterns and entropy profiles. The hoax hypothesis. But the carbon dating to the 1400s and the sophisticated linguistic patterns make a hoax extremely difficult without computational tools that would not exist for 500 more years. Stylistic analysis of swallowtail battlements in the illustrations suggests composition in northern Italy or the Alpine region. In October 2025, X-ray fluorescence imaging confirmed Johannes Marcus Marcy's zinc-heavy ink alongside Voynich's sulfur-based reagent, supporting the provenance chain. Multispectral imaging revealed hidden marginalia, attempted translations by previous owners in nearly invisible ink. All unsuccessful. 3 theories. Mainstream. An encoded medical or alchemical text in a deliberately obscured script, possibly a constructed language. Archaeological. A gynecological manual explaining the biological imagery of women and plants. Fringe. An elaborate hoax, possibly by Edward Kelly or another 15th century confidence artist, using a finite-state machine-like table system to generate plausible-looking nonsense. The Voynich Manuscript forces a confrontation with the limits of pattern recognition. A text can have all the statistical properties of language and still resist every attempt at meaning. These 10 objects share something beyond mystery. They share a pattern in how knowledge disappears. Knowledge loss is not random. It follows predictable pathways tied to how knowledge was stored and transmitted. 4 mechanisms recur across these 10 artifacts: institutional collapse, artisanal secrecy, linguistic death, and material impermanence. Roman concrete vanished because Rome fell. The Lycurgus Cup's recipe died with its glass-making guild. The Phaistos Disc became unreadable because its language went extinct. The Baghdad Battery was looted in 2003. The artisanal bottleneck is especially devastating. When knowledge exists only in the hands of a few specialists, a single generation's disruption erases it permanently. Writing does not guarantee survival either. The Voynich Manuscript survived physically, but its meaning died with its author's encoding system. Pliny described Roman concrete's recipe, but not the critical hot mixing technique. Partial documentation can be worse than nothing because it creates the illusion of completeness. Each of these artifacts also depended on what might be called silent prerequisites. The Antikythera Mechanism required not just gear-cutting skill, but Babylonian astronomical data, Greek theoretical models, and metallurgical precision, each from a different tradition. Empire collapse severs these supply chains. Pozzolana stopped being shipped when Rome fell. High phosphorus charcoal stopped being selected when Indian smithing industrialized. Religious conversion eliminates symbolic literacy. The Dendera inscriptions are readable today only because Champollion cracked hieroglyphics. Without that, the light bulb theory would be unfalsifiable. The 1300-year gap after the Antikythera Mechanism shows that technological regression is not a gradual decline. It is a cliff. One generation's disruption can erase centuries of progress. Modern digital knowledge faces analogous vulnerabilities. Format obsolescence, server decay, and institutional collapse could erase our knowledge just as thoroughly. The iron pillar is a case where the ancient smiths may have transmitted their technique as a simple rule of thumb: use this type of wood, without any understanding of the underlying phosphorus chemistry. That kind of practical recipe, handed down without explanation, is fragile. One break in the chain and it vanishes. Understanding how knowledge was lost is one half of the story. The other half is how modern science is recovering it. The most important archaeological breakthroughs of the 21st century are happening not in the field but in laboratories, using physics tools originally designed for completely different purposes. The 2005 Antikythera Mechanism research project used X-ray computed tomography to read inscriptions inside corroded bronze that had been invisible for 2,100 years. The Glasgow team's 2024 study repurposed gravitational wave analysis techniques, Bayesian statistical methods from astrophysics, to determine the calendar ring had 354 holes. Multispectral imaging revealed hidden marginalia in the Voynich Manuscript, previous owners attempted translations in nearly invisible ink that standard photography cannot detect. The October 2025 X-ray fluorescence imaging distinguished Marcy's zinc-heavy ink from Voynich's sulfur-based reagent. Chemical fingerprinting of individual handwriting. At IIT Kanpur, electron microscopy and Moosbauer spectroscopy, nuclear physics techniques, characterize the iron pillar's rust layers at the atomic level, identifying the Missa-White film. Fourier-Fabrer spectroscopy was essential to understanding the phosphate passivation mechanism. Marie Jackson used synchrotron radiation, a particle accelerator, to map mineral growth in Roman concrete at the micron scale. Admir Masik's 2023 MIT study used micro-X-ray diffraction to identify the hot mixing signature in lime class, a technique unavailable even 20 years earlier. Ian Freestone's analysis of the Lycurgus Cup required transmission electron microscopy to image the 50 to 100 nanometer nanoparticles. The color-shifting mechanism was literally invisible before the 1980s. Alexander Bezos's 2026 Baghdad Battery study recognized that the clay jar was electrochemically active only by applying modern electrochemistry frameworks to the full object. Wind tunnel testing and flight simulation analyzed the Saqqara Bird. Many of these artifacts sat in museums for decades or centuries before the right analytical tool existed. The Nimrud Lens for 150 years, the Saqqara Bird for 70. AI-assisted analysis and computational linguistics are now being applied to the Voynich and the Antikythera fragments. Yale's digital publication of the Voynich allows anyone with a computer to attempt decipherment. 3D printing, used to replicate the Lycurgus effect in 2020, lets researchers test hypotheses by physically reproducing objects. Each new technique potentially unlocks secrets and artifacts already sitting in museum collections. And these are not just academic exercises. At least 4 artifacts in this documentary have directly inspired active modern technology programs. The Lycurgus Cup leads directly to the University of Illinois' nano-LCA biosensor arrays, cheap plastic stamps detecting DNA, drugs, and proteins using the same surface plasmon resonance principle as the Roman cup. Cambridge University's multicolored holograms containing 16 million nanoparticles per square millimeter use the dichroic principle for potential optical data storage. Marie Jackson's RPRE grant targets marine concrete that can survive in seawater. Masik's DMAT startup is commercializing self-healing concrete right now. If Roman-inspired concrete reduced Portland cement's 8% share of global carbon dioxide emissions even marginally, the climate impact would be enormous. The iron pillar's phosphorus passivation is studied as a model for low-cost anti-corrosion coatings that do not require chromium. The Antikythera Mechanism reshaped the history of computing and is now a standard reference in computer science courses. The Voynich Manuscript has become a benchmark for computational linguistics and AI pattern recognition, testing whether algorithms can distinguish language from structured noise. A 2020 Dutch 3D printed nanocomposite replicated the Lycurgus effect, demonstrating an ancient to additive manufacturing pipeline. Ancient innovators worked with fundamental physical phenomena, surface plasmon resonance, mineral crystallization, galvanic reactions, the same phenomena modern engineers use, just at different scales. The physical principles were never lost, only the specific human traditions for applying them. And this leads to the hardest question of all: how much have we lost that we do not even know about. The Antikythera Mechanism was found because a shipwreck happened to be in diveable water near a shipping lane. How many equivalent devices sank in deeper water or were melted for scrap? Bronze was routinely melted and recast throughout antiquity. The survival of a bronze instrument is statistically exceptional. The Phaistos Disc's 45 reusable stamps imply mass production was intended, so where are the other stamped objects? The 450 ancient lenses Temple documented were mostly misidentified as beads or decorations for decades. The real count is almost certainly higher. Organic materials decay completely in most climates. The Saqqara Bird survived only because of Egypt's extreme aridity. Only a small fraction of the Mediterranean seabed has been surveyed. Ancient shipwrecks containing unknown technologies almost certainly remain undiscovered. We have objects made of stone, crystal, fired clay, and corrosion-resistant metals. Knowledge stored in perishable formats is gone forever. The Voynich Manuscript survival is itself anomalous. Most medieval manuscripts were scraped clean and reused as palimpsests, destroyed in wars, or rotted. The Baghdad Battery's 2003 looting is a modern example of knowledge destruction. Artifacts are still being lost today. Climate change is simultaneously revealing and destroying archaeological sites. Melting glaciers expose artifacts. Rising seas erode coastal sites. AI-assisted surveys of existing museum collections are beginning to identify misclassified objects. The next Nimrud Lens may already sit in a museum drawer labeled as a bead. The 2021 UCL study found previously unknown gear configurations in the most studied artifact in this documentary. Even objects examined for decades still yield surprises. Some ancient technologies may have been independently invented multiple times in different cultures and lost each time. The Baghdad Battery and the Volta Battery may represent separate discoveries of the same principle. Roman concrete survived 500 years within the empire, but vanished within a century of its fall. Long traditions can disappear quickly. The manufacturing precision implied by the Antikythera Mechanism's 0.028mm hole positioning demands tools we have never found. The Lycurgus Cup's uniqueness means we cannot study the learning curve. We have only the masterwork, not the failed experiments. We are almost certainly underestimating ancient capabilities, not overestimating them. The surviving evidence is a floor, not a ceiling. And digital data, the medium on which our own civilization stores its knowledge, has a shorter expected lifespan than Roman concrete, Egyptian wood carvings, or Minoan-fired clay. Every artifact in this documentary exploits fundamental physical laws: surface plasmon resonance, galvanic reactions, mineral crystallization, aerodynamic lift, optical refraction, phosphorus passivation, mechanical computation. These are not alien technologies, they are human solutions arrived at through observation, experimentation, and generations of refinement. The fringe theories, aliens, lost advanced civilizations, actually diminish these achievements by denying human credit for human ingenuity. What separates ancient innovators from modern ones is not intelligence. It is infrastructure, the ability to preserve, transmit, and build upon knowledge across generations. Every broken transmission chain in this documentary represents a failure of institutions, not of individuals. The physical principles behind these artifacts were always available. Gravity, chemistry, optics, metallurgy operate the same today as they did 4,000 years ago. The fundamental laws of nature do not change, only our ability to read them, lose them, and find them again.